Hey everyone, and welcome to this deep dive. We're going to be taking a good look at Quintana Roo in 2024, really focusing in on what happened last year. And, we've got some pretty good sources, I think. We've got like Forbes Mexico and La Jornada Maya, even some local publications so we can really drill down and see what's going on, especially for those of you out there that are thinking about real estate in Quintana Roo. We want to give you guys that 2024 snapshot to help you out.
Absolutely. And I think one of the most striking things when you look at the data is just how resilient Quintana Roo's tourism sector was in 2024. We're talking record-breaking numbers again, matching that incredible performance from 2023. Over 20 million visitors choosing Quintana Roo for their vacations.
Yeah, over 20 million. That's pretty incredible, especially when you consider, all the stuff going on globally last year, the economic uncertainty. We had those elections in Mexico and the U.S. You'd think that might have, scared some people off?
You would think. But it seems like the allure of the Mexican Caribbean is just too strong to resist. And Forbes Mexico really highlighted this, how the region kind of defied expectations, maintained its appeal despite those challenges.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And when we look at the hotel occupancy rates, that really tells the story too.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Numbers speak volumes. And Geraldo de Mexico, Quintana Roo, they reported an average occupancy rate across the region of 85%.
85%?
Wow. And that's just the average. During those peak holiday periods, we're talking like, end of year holidays, they're hitting 90% occupancy.
Wow, that is a strong signal. People really want to be there, spend their money.
Yeah, they're not just thinking about it, they're booking those trips. And another really interesting thing is, we often think about international tourists when we talk about Quintana Roo, but Quadraj in Quintana Roo reported that Mexican nationals themselves made up a significant chunk of those visitors, like 35.5% to be exact.
So a good mix of domestic and international.
Exactly.
That's good for stability, I would imagine.
Oh, absolutely. You don't want to be reliant on just one source. It makes the market much more resilient.
For sure. Makes sense.
But beyond just the numbers, what I found really fascinating is that Quintana Roo isn't just relying on the sun and beach anymore.
Oh, yeah. I've been hearing about that, like this shift towards cultural tourism and even adventure tourism.
But exactly. And publications like Real Estate Market and Lifestyle, they're really highlighting this trend.
So it's not just about, lounging on the beach anymore.
It seems not. People want to explore those Mayan ruins. They want to do like ecotourism activities, connect with the local communities, really experience the region in a deeper way.
That makes a lot of sense. If people are staying longer, doing more stuff, that's got to be good for the local economy.
Oh, absolutely. It pumps more money into the local businesses. Right. And for investors, this diversification opens up all sorts of new possibilities.
Yeah, I can see that. Because it's not just about those traditional tourist zones anymore.
Exactly. We might see some previously overlooked areas start to gain traction, become those new hotspots.
Okay, well, let's dive into some of those key regions then and see what was going on in 2024. Now, I know Cancun and the Riviera Maya, they're always going to be popular.
They are the classics. And Geraldo de Mexico Quintana Roo confirmed they saw really strong occupancy rates throughout 2024.
Okay, so no surprises there.
Not really, but there was one detail that I found particularly interesting. It was about Playa del Carmen. Towards the end of December.
Oh, what happened there?
Well, Paresto reported that. Playa del Carmen hit a record 95.3% occupancy.
Wow, 95%.
As people were flocking there for the New Year celebrations.
That is a huge spike.
It is. It really shows how certain events can drive those short-term surges in demand.
Interesting. And what about Tulum? I feel like Tulum has become kind of a destination for a very specific type of traveler these days.
Yeah, it definitely has a certain vibe, and Radio Formula actually reported that Tulum is now the leading destination for international female tourists, capturing a whopping 59% of that market segment.
So women seeking that blend of culture and nature.
It seems so. And then, of course, we have Cozumel.
Ah, Cozumel, the cruise ship capital.
Exactly. And it continued to dominate that market in 2024. Diario 24 Horas Quintana Roo reported they welcomed a record-breaking 12,281 cruise ships, carrying over 4.6 million passengers.
Wow, that is a lot of people coming and going.
It is. And it really highlights the unique role that Cozumel plays in Quintana Roo's overall tourism landscape.
So we've got these established hotspots like Cancun and Playa del Carmen. We've got these up-and-coming destinations like Tulum, catering to specific niches. And then you've got Cozumel with its cruise ship-driven economy. All these different pieces fitting together to create this really interesting picture of Quintana Roo's 2024 tourism performance.
Absolutely. And it's all happening
Yeah.
against this backdrop of,
Yeah.
political shifts and major infrastructure projects that could have a big impact on the real estate landscape in Quintana Roo. So
Sure.
there's a lot to unpack there, a lot to consider for investors.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll dig into all of that in the next part of this deep dive.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Like how all these different types of visitors, they all contribute to the success of Quintana Roo's tourism. You've got those cruise ship folks in Cozumel, and then those experience-driven travelers heading to Tulum. It's a real mix.
Yeah, definitely. And I think understanding those differences is really important for anyone looking at real estate there. You got to know who your potential renters or buyers are going to be.
Exactly. So let's dig a little deeper into those visitor demographics.
Okay, so we touched on the domestic tourism earlier. Remember, Quadratin Quintana Roo was reporting that Mexican nationals make up over 35% of visitors. But what about internationally? Who's coming from outside of Mexico?
Well, the U.S. is still the top dog, real estate market and lifestyle says. Americans make up 37.3% of international tourists.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's so easy for Americans to get down there. Direct flights, familiar culture, I guess.
Right. And then Canadians are a solid second at 9.1%.
Those Canadians love escaping the cold, I bet. Gotta get some of that sunshine.
Definitely. But here's something that I think is really interesting for investors. Forbes Mexico pointed out that we're seeing a growing influence from emerging markets like Europe and Latin America.
Oh, so the international market is diversifying.
Exactly. So while the U.S. and Canada are still huge, this growth from other parts of the world, it adds another layer of, stability.
That's the market less reliant on any one country.
Exactly. Kind of like diversifying your own investment portfolio.
Right, spread the risk.
Exactly. Now, speaking of diversification, let's bring it back to infrastructure.
Yeah.
How that could impact real estate.
Yeah, the Tren Maya. Everyone's talking about the Tren Maya.
And for good reason. Forbes Mexico highlighted just how much potential this project has to really shake things up.
In what way?
Well, the whole idea is to connect those popular tourist destinations with some of the lesser-known areas, maybe even underdeveloped areas. And this improved connectivity could really open up those regions for investment and development.
So investors shouldn't just be looking at the Cancuns and Tulums.
Exactly. There could be some real hidden gems out there.
Especially along that Tren Maya route.
There's like a strategic puzzle. You got to understand the tourism patterns, but also how these big developments could change things.
You got it. It's
Yeah.
not just about buying any property. It's about anticipating those future growth areas.
Interesting. Okay, so we've talked about tourism, we've talked about infrastructure, but we can't forget about the political side of things. La Renata Maya mentioned that. Trump being back in the White House has created some uncertainty.
Yeah, understandably so. Any change in U.S. policy could have a ripple effect on Mexico.
Sure.
But La Renata Maya also included a quote from Javier Olvera. He's the president of the Business Coordinated Council of the Caribbean. And he was actually quite optimistic about the U.S.-Mexico relationship. He thinks they could renegotiate the free trade agreement in a way that benefits Quintana Roo.
So maybe it's not all doom and gloom.
Right. It's a complex situation, but the key is to stay informed and be adaptable.
Right. Don't panic.
Exactly.
Okay, so just to recap for our listeners, before we move on,
We've established that Quintana Roo's tourism is strong.
record-breaking visitor numbers, great hotel occupancy rates.
And it's not just the quantity. It's the diversity of those visitors, both domestic and international.
Which makes the market more resilient,
We've also seen that shift towards cultural and adventure tourism.
creating opportunities beyond those traditional hotspots,
And of course, the Tren Maya is this big wild card,
potentially reshaping the entire region.
creating both challenges and opportunities for investors.
And while there's some uncertainty with the new U.S. administration, there's also optimism about the future of U.S.-Mexico relations.
Okay, so we've painted this big picture, but it feels like we're just scratching the surface.
You're absolutely right. In the final part of this dip dive, we're going to move beyond these broad trends and explore some specific insights and maybe even some potential investment strategies to help you navigate this exciting market.
Okay, so we've looked at the big picture of Quintana Roo
Mhm.
in 2024. We've seen the tourism numbers, dug into the visitor demographics, and consider those major developments like the Tren Maya and how they could reshape the region.
Exactly. We've laid the groundwork.
But the question is, how do we translate all of this information into something useful for real estate investors?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Well, let's start by connecting those tourism statistics to tangible real estate potential.
Okay, so we know people are going to Quintana Roo. But what does that tell us about investment opportunities?
Think about those hotel occupancy rates. An average of 85% across the Caribbean Mexican region with peaks of 90%. That tells you there's a strong demand for accommodations.
So vacation rentals, hotels, anything catering to those tourists.
Exactly. And remember how Quintana Roo is diversifying its tourism offerings.
Right, like cultural tourism and adventure tourism.
That broadens the potential market beyond just those traditional coastal areas.
So there could be opportunities in places that are kind of off the beaten path right now, but are well positioned to benefit from those shifting preferences. Like maybe a boutique hotel near a Mayan ruin that's newly accessible, or eco-lodges for adventure tourists.
See, now you're thinking strategically. It's about anticipating those emerging hotspots and understanding how those changing tourism preferences create new opportunities.
So instead of just following the crowd, you got to look ahead, do your research, and understand those nuances.
Exactly. And that's why keeping an eye on things like the Tren Maya is so important. It's not just about transportation.
Right, it's about how that infrastructure could unlock new areas for development and investment.
You got it. The Tren Maya is a potential catalyst for growth in regions that were previously overlooked. Investors need to be paying attention to its route and those development plans emerging around it.
It's like a ripple effect.
Exactly.
Right.
Understanding those ripple effects is key to identifying those areas that are poised for significant value appreciation.
And we also can't forget about the political landscape. We talked about Trump being back in office.
Yeah, and while there's some concern about potential policy shifts, it's important to remember that things are always changing.
Right, we heard from the Business Coordinating Council of the Caribbean. And they were actually quite optimistic about strengthening U.S.-Mexico relations and potential benefits for Quintana Roo's tourism industry.
Exactly. Navigating this dynamic political landscape requires staying informed and being adaptable. Don't overreact.
Right. Okay, so for investors looking at Quintana Roo, what are some key strategies to keep in mind?
Well, first and foremost, due diligence is paramount. Don't just jump on the first opportunity you see. Thoroughly research the specific regions and property types that align with your investment goals and your risk tolerance.
So really getting granular with your research, understanding the micro markets within Quintana Roo.
Exactly. Consider factors like proximity to tourist attractions, access to infrastructure, zoning regulations. Don't forget about potential challenges like hurricane risks or environmental regulations.
And of course, diversification is always a good strategy.
Absolutely. Spreading your investments across different regions and property types can help mitigate risk and create a more balanced portfolio.
So maybe a mix of vacation rentals in a well-established area, some land near a projected Tren Maya stop, maybe some ecotourism-focused properties.
Now you're thinking strategically. The key is to understand the market dynamics, anticipate trends, and find opportunities that align with your individual investment goals.
So it sounds like investing in Quintana Roo requires a blend of data analysis, a little bit of a futurist mindset to anticipate those trends, and good old-fashioned research on the ground.
You got it. Quintana Roo offers exciting potential, but it's not a get-rich-quick scheme. It demands a thoughtful, informed approach.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive. We've explored the data, the trends, and those strategic considerations for real estate investment in Quintana Roo. Hopefully our listeners feel equipped to take that next step in their investment journey.
Remember, knowledge is power. Stay curious, stay engaged, and don't be afraid to dig deep.
That's a wrap on this episode of The Deep Dive. We'll catch you next time as we explore another fascinating topic. Until then, happy investing.